Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul,
and Jolene. And today we're talking about unintentional or intentional NPC deaths and what you do when this happens
as a GM
as a GM, as a
player.
player.
Okay. I think when you play role playing games, especially like Dungeons and Dragons, right? Dungeons and Dragons is a tough game to. It's a tough game because it so easily segues or becomes a murder hobo game, right? So, if I remember years ago, I heard this term and I had no idea what the other person was talking about. If you don't know, a murder hobo is basically what a lot of people accuse many, especially D&D players, of being. So you're a roving band of a group of people who go around killing things, taking their stuff, and selling their stuff, right?
To make
Theoretically.
money. So you're basically mercenaries.
Yeah, so you're the hobo is that you're just wandering group of people that go from town to town, solving problems, and I use quotes on that one, and and their primary job is to kill things, right? They go and kill monsters and eliminate problems usually. And the problem with that is that when you get into that mindset, what does that say, that every problem looks like a nail or something like that? And when you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, something like that. I don't know what it is. I keep forgetting that one
You
wrong.
need to stop using sayings you don't know what they are.
But what the gist of it is that when you are used to doing solving a problem by killing it, then that becomes the main way of dealing with any problem, whether it's it's uh it's a monster or not.
And this comes into conflict with our moral code of humans, of most humans anyway, that you're not supposed to kill other people.
Right.
So if you're killing monsters, it's one thing, but when you go and kill other people, it's a different thing. So
Correct.
we in society, we've come up with these ideas that it's okay to kill soldiers during war because you're in war. So it's somehow it keeps you mentally from breaking down for having killed somebody, basically. So most people don't kill people. Those who do are deviant and have, or maybe they're just, a psychopath or whatever, which would be a deviant, right? So, but the idea in role playing games is that we don't stray too far from our normal lives, other than the fact that we're in a fantasy world and doing all kinds of different things, right? But the question came up because I read about these people playing Deadlands, and some guy wanted to know, what do you do when your player characters accidentally kill innocent civilians, non-player characters, on a train when they're chasing the robbers and trying to, or they're on a bounty hunt to try to get somebody, right?
Right.
They were sent out to get this person, these people, these robbers, right? These train robbers. But in when this happened, they accidentally killed people. So
Collateral damage.
yeah, you could look at it that way. But what's going to happen to them, right? Because people, when the train stops in town where the marshal is, the people are going to say, they shot all these people and they killed Joe.
Right. Yeah, a lot of it depends. I was gonna say that's a very difficult situation for the PCs to be in, the player characters, and I think a lot of this depends on the game that you're playing. Right, there's a difference between being
Forgotten Realms,
in a Forgotten Realms game and being in a
Wild West,
Western,
yeah.
and let's say being in a Star Trek game, right, where the Wild West is kind of wild, right? So I don't know what the I honestly I don't know the legal situation of
Well, anytime
that person.
somebody dies, right?
What's
Even
that?
if it, even anytime somebody dies, there's going to be an inquiry or a trial, even in westerns.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think they will let you pass just
No,
because you were chasing a bad guy.
no, they
Yeah.
would probably let you go, but there would be some kind of trial, right?
Right.
They would say you were justified in doing this,
Right.
or
They would want some legal way of dealing with that situation.
Also, the sheriff might use it as a reason to not only get you out of town but solve a different problem. Right? You need to go and catch this bad guy,
Right.
this outlaw.
And then there's restitution, right? We know the restitution to the person or the person's family, whatever. I think it depends. A lot of it depends on the game that you're playing. I remember I ran a lot of space opera games, and a lot of times they would go on these secret missions to, you know, to investigate this whatever it was, and a lot of times they would get into combat. You know, just they would always fight things, and usually it was
The secret police or something
it
like
was a
that.
secret police, or it was an enemy base, or something like
Or
that,
the traitor.
or a secret clone facility thing. And I've talked about how they the PCs had captured this one scientist, and they were literally taking him to the law, wherever that was, the nearest spaceport, and then and they ended up executing him. Right, they spaced him because he was such a vile person. And
And that's what happens when you play with people who have a sense of morality that they believe
a very strict moral
strong.
code. So, but obviously the moral code wasn't against killing, and this guy definitely, according to them, needed to not exist anymore because he was too dangerous to leave alive, right? So he was like a Nazi scientist kind of person. Though
Mangala.
I believe we used quite a few Nazi scientists when they lost.
The greater good is what they say.
Right. So in that case, I think it really is important. I mean, it really does depend on the players and the kind of game that they're and the kind of game that you're playing. That Western game, I don't know. I think you're right that they would definitely face some consequences, and I think that's the main thing about anytime player characters kill NPCs is that there has to be consequences to their actions. I remember years ago, you weren't playing then, were you? When Steve
Yes, I
killed.
was.
Oh, you were playing already. They go. It was at the very beginning of Rise of the Rune Lords, right? They go into this town, and the yeah, the actual, the very beginning of the adventure, and unlike, and I had already started the campaign, so these guys were like third or fourth level. Where Rise of the Rune Lords is supposed to be, you start off as first level, but they had already started their adventuring. I had already started, and I decided to pick up Rise of the Rune Lords, and I decided to run the game, and it was just the way it was. So they go into this town, and then they have deputies or constables, whatever you want to call them, and they were asked to give up their weapons, right? Because these things, they were murder hobos, right? There's this large, they were a large group. There were like 6 or 7 of them at the time, and they're all armed to the hilt, right? They got crossbows, they have bows, they have swords, axes.
It's like the scene in Lord of the Rings where they come to Theoden's castle
Yes,
and
the hall.
the hall, and they say you need to give up your weapons, and Aragorn is taking out knives out everywhere and
Yes,
handing them over.
big old pile of weapons, or like what is it? Mad Max. At one point he enters Bartertown and has to give up his weapons, and he has he literally has a pile of weapons also on his person. So exactly. But they were so unused to this, right? Because I had already ran them. At least Steve, the dad. I had ran 2 campaigns where they went up to 10th level at the time already, and at this point I was playing with our sons, right? It was a kids Pathfinder game, and we were playing at a hobby store, and he didn't want to give up his weapons. I'm like, well, you can't come into our town. You can't walk around with, literally, it's not open carry town, right? So he refused, and then so they go, well, then you got to leave, and he got into a fight with the guard. So then he starts running away, right? So he's running away, and they're chasing him, and then he gets into this area where he gets cornered, literally, and he crits the guard with his weapon. He hits him with, he pulls out his weapon, and he fights him, and he crits him and kills him. They're guards. They're like maybe second level. He does like freaking 20 something points of damage because he's using a 2-handed sword, and he kills him. And he goes, "Well, I didn't mean to kill him." I'm like, "Okay, I'm sorry, but that's just the way you rolled." And so, of course, I forgot how I captured him, but then he gets surrounded by guards, and the rest of the party or the rest of the group of people, the players are like, they didn't know what to do. You know, they're I don't remember. Do you remember what you were thinking?
I was saying, why would he fight them?
You know, he gets captured, he gets thrown into a jail, and then the rest of the session was, you know, it was nothing that I planned. Right, had to deal with had to deal with how to let him out. Right, because I didn't want him to make a new character. You know, he really should have because he literally killed a guard in cold blood. So you know, they were like I said, they were like fourth level. So I charged them an outrageous amount of money, like 3,000 gold. I go, you know what? You first thing you need to do is you make restitution to the family of the guard. That means you gotta pay his life wages, which nothing is. It wasn't worth that much, but you know, but it was punitive damages, right? And so you know, you owe the town, you know, for the violence that you know, and all this other stuff. So I mean, and the group ponied up the money, right? It was very I think they had to, all of them had to pull their money together, and nobody was happy about it, right? But that, I mean, I go, that's the only way he's gonna get out, and so so he, you know, he gets out of jail, and then immediately the sheriff, of the town, and the mayor of the town, or whatever, they send them on a mission because they want these guys out. You know, not only was it the payment of the money, but they had a goblin attack. The famous, you know, spoiler, but it's been out for like 20 years. But there's a goblin attack, and then the town sends them to figure out, you know, why these goblins are attacking them, since they haven't been attacking for years and years. So and that starts the whole campaign.
It was a very interesting game to be in with the kids because they were still young.
Yeah, they were little.
Yeah, they were like 8, 9, maybe 10.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I guess they were like 10 or 11.
But Saul was right. You know, you kill a guard, there's going to be consequences. And Steve was like, "Well, I didn't mean to kill him," but and then Saul talked to him and said, "This is why you can't just do that. And the kids can't just you can't be playing a game and get away with something like that because then you're teaching the kids that that's okay."
Yeah, there's no consequences. And so even we had another player called Blaine, and he's like I talked to him afterwards because I thought, you know, I thought maybe I was being too critical because I was kind of upset. One, because he just didn't, and there was no reason why he didn't want to give up. He just didn't want to, and I'm like, okay, well then leave the town. And then like he didn't want to do that either. He goes, "I'll make me," and so he gets into this fisticuffs, or he gets into this fight, and then he just runs away, and then he kills the guard. And so it was not a pleasant session for me because I'm like, because he was mad, he was absolutely, you know, not the character, but the player was mad that I threw him in jail, and that I was like being had a firm idea that no, you're not gonna get out. You know, basically, you literally murdered it's like murdering a police officer, right? Killing a police officer, and when all they're doing is trying to detain you, you know, because like, well, why you walk around with a gun? It's not an open carry town. You need to, you know, we're not taking it away from you. Just while you're in town, you need to give up your weapons. But yeah, but he was mad. I mean, he was mad about the situation, and I wasn't happy about it, and I was not happy with that whole session. But we got past it. But the thing is, the consequences, you know, the group lost a lot of money. They weren't happy about that because you know they were greedy murder hobos, and you know, and they kind of like they have this money, and they kind of want to they already have it what earmarked, right, for certain things that they want to buy, and so that, you know, it
Magical items, I believe.
magical items, yeah, and so that blew their plans, you know, and then they were broke, and so they're like, well, we do kind of have to go on this mission because they're gonna pay us money if we do it. So it motivated them to go on the campaign, but at the same time, you know, the consequences were basically just money. But what I was going to do is, as the game progressed, I was gonna make like the guard had children, and I was gonna make them into like villains, right? And they would go after Steve's character. But you know, the campaign didn't last that long. I forget why. It was a really good game. I mean, it was a really good campaign. That was really neat. But the consequence was that he, the character, would have gained uh,
Enemies.
a nemesis, right?
Right.
Or it could have been the wife. The wife could have gone, you know, all retribution on him sooner or later, right? I think that's important that in almost any game, unless you're like, you know, I don't know where, but somewhere where there's no law, right? The only law is whatever you can get away with, and in that case, NPCs could be killed and there's no consequences. But those situations are like really rare. Whether, like I said, whether it's a role playing, any role playing game, no matter what the genre is, and there's certain genres that where there's laws, right? Like in Star Trek, there'll definitely be laws. There'll definitely be consequences, and most likely, you couldn't buy your way out of prison in Star Trek, right? In the Star Trek universe, so you would have to be really careful about your displays of violence and resorting to violence in your game.
Yes.
So what did they? This guy asked the question, right, about how he should handle it, or
yes.
And what did he get any good replies?
Well, I gave you the replies. There would always be a trial.
Oh yeah.
And most likely because you were, chasing a bad guy, there would be consequences, but you would most likely not go to jail or anything like that. You would probably have to pay
some sort of fine,
or a price for to the family for taking away their source of income or whatever. And that's an old tradition that goes way back.
Does it? Well, what's weird is that what do you call it? I mean, that's weird. I mean, the weird thing is I don't know if you would want even Deadlands. Well, Deadlands maybe you would want to, but have a trial, right? Role play the trial, or you would just like, okay, this is what's going to happen. So a lot of it depends on how reckless the PCs were being, right? The characters were, and was it whether it is totally can be determined if they actually killed the person, or could it have been the bad guys that killed them, right?
Yeah.
And that's and that has there's all kinds of mitigating circumstances in that, and that characters could feign or pretend or figure out that maybe it wasn't me who killed them, maybe it was the bad guy who killed the person, but like you could make it dramatic, right? As a GM, like the player character has his eye on the bad guy, he's about to shoot him, and Miss Dorothy Sweetbottom gets in front of him just as he pulls the trigger, and he shoots her instead. Or could it be that all bullets are flying, and then at the very end there's a dead body, so you don't know who killed the person. So
I always think about Dean and Sam Winchester. They're monster hunters, right?
Yes.
So, but they live in the real world,
right?
Sort of. Supernatural.
They live in a real world. It's set in the real world.
Yes.
But where monsters really exist. And I think that's happened before where the problem is that sometimes the monsters look like real people.
Or the monsters are real
people, right?
Like FBI agents or things like that, or
just
bad cops
or regular people.
And they end up
having to kill them.
And they end up being wanted for killing people.
Because they do kill the monster.
Yeah.
Who happen to look like a person.
Yes.
Like a werewolf. Let's say they kill a werewolf. So So how do you explain that? So how do you deal with that situation?
Well, in the show, they are wanted in certain states. So
for the connection in certain crimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are also cops who can help them with that kind of stuff because they were there and realized that that's not what happened, so they changed the reports or different things like that.
Yeah, I remember that.
But it's a very slippery slope, and you think about it, that's one of the, if you're a monster hunter, you're killing these monsters, right? But you really have to be careful not to actually kill humans, and if you do kill a human, then it's going to cause your character great mental problems, right? Or pain or
in jail.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's pretty interesting because you're right. Because in the role-playing game, they talk about that. They talk about how these monsters usually, well, not usually, but some of them are they're disguised as humans, right? And they have, either they take over human persona or they turn into a monster.
Well, the
under the moon.
Kill the person and take them.
Or
they possess them.
Or they're possessed by demons and stuff like that. Or whatever monster it is. But they're known as people, and so when they go after the monster, they're to the rest of the populace, they're killing an actual person.
Right.
right? And so, what do you do with that? That was always an interesting part of that show and the role playing game is, you know, how do you cover that up, or how do you get away with it? Because the general populace doesn't know that you killed a werewolf. They just know that you killed Mr. Bingles, the sweet old man that lived in that creepy old house. Sure, he was creepy, but he didn't deserve to be killed.
But like, just like supernatural is a lot like other things, right? Most people don't see what's going on. So if Mr. Bingles disappears, that doesn't necessarily mean he's dead. It just means he's gone.
Right. Right. So yeah.
So he moved.
So they really try to cover their tracks in that game.
Yeah.
In that game and in that show, right? They basically clean up the crime scene, so there's no. So basically, you're right. It just becomes a missing persons thing.
Right.
There's a lot of missing persons where those guys show up, right?
It was the same in D&D, right? Those guys are coming in with their armed to the teeth. So, of course, in Supernatural, Dean's armory is the back of his trunk, but it's the same thing, right?
Yes, but see, it's hidden in that sense,
Yeah.
right? A lot of it depends on the genre you're playing and the kind of game you're playing, but you definitely want to limit this collateral damage of NPCs, no matter what the situation. I think NPCs are usually characters that are beneficial to the players, or they're innocent bystanders like the one on the train. And I think it'd be very tough. I mean, I think I don't know what is it, evidence gathering procedures, or how good it was in the Wild West. I think for the most part it had to be
forensics wasn't quite there
right.
yet.
So the way most people went to jail for crimes was eyewitness testimony,
Yes.
right? And
which is notoriously bad.
it's notoriously bad. In fact, when I was going to college, one of my professors was an expert eyewitness, right? And he was an expert eyewitness in testimony, right? And he would testify that eyewitness testimony is one of the most unreliable ways of one of the most unreliable evidence that you can put, because people aren't paying attention, and there's all kinds of reasons, right, that it's not very good. Can you imagine, especially the bullets are flying, I didn't see anything, I just ducked my head, and then I saw,
I saw a short Mexican guy that was medium build.
Oh yeah,
with dark hair and dark eyes.
They don't say short. They say medium height, medium build.
And that's the description we get all the time on the news here. And I'm like going, dude,
possibly Latin descent.
You described, half the population.
Well, yeah, at least.
So eyewitnesses aren't very good. So when you're drawing a picture of somebody, or you see a picture in your head, and then you try to tell it to the police officer, this is what's going to come out, right? So eyewitness testimony and eyewitness accounts, and even searching for suspects is not necessarily.
I mean, what would you do? I mean, you already said it. You would have consequences. You would make them pay. Like I said, in the Wild West one, I think the most difficult thing is if people are shooting, most people are ducking, right? And so, do you really have an eyewitness to I shot this person, or that character was verifiable that when you shot, that person went down, and it couldn't have been anybody else. I mean, I don't know if I guess they could tell if they were shot.
Kind of doubtful in a train situation like
Yeah.
that, unless you were the only character in the
shooting,
right?
Yes, maybe. But most likely they were shooting back and forth.
But it's a moral dilemma question, right? Oh, in your games, there's always going to be moral dilemmas, right?
Well, hopefully.
Because otherwise it's going to be pretty boring. But so it's the way that you handle it, it's always important to make sure that your player characters know that there are standards, and you shouldn't kill other people, right?
There are laws, right?
Yeah, I think whatever game it is.
Yes. I think that's the biggest problem is, like I said, murder hobos, everything is solved by killing the things, right?
Yeah. Well, it's if you're playing a modern game, right? You have soldiers and stuff. You have to make sure that they're going to need to make sure they don't kill civilians.
Right.
Also, they're going to if they've come back from war, they got to make sure that they're looking at people right, right? It's not. That's why we have laws in the United States, like the CIA is not allowed to operate within the United
Oh,
States.
is that true?
And
I wasn't sure that was still true. Uh, but for example, I remember I forget why it came up, but maybe I was reading a lot of books on post-apocalyptic situations, and I was reading non-fantastical like Twilight 2000,
right,
and they were talking about there was a discussion about the characters always killing everything, right? Because they were talking about people who this is Twilight 2000. I'm pretty sure it was Twilight 2000. They were talking about how in D&D everything is solvable by killing it. There's monsters,
mostly yes.
yes,
Although you should try to reason with them first.
you could try, and then but Twilight 2000 there is no monsters. The monsters or the adversaries are other human beings. So, and I forget where it was, but it basically said that if the PCs all they do is kill everybody and take their stuff, even
Then they're going to be the monsters.
even in a post-apocalyptic setting, they're going to be seen as the monsters. And whether there's almost no laws or warlord law or whatever you want to call it or situation, the PCs are going to be known as the most dangerous beings or group, and they will have to be eliminated because indiscriminately killing everything is can be seen as a bad thing, right? It can be nobody wants those guys as neighbors, right? If this group of adventurers, whatever you want to call them, mercenaries, moves into your area and their way of dealing with things is killing everything and taking their stuff, then other people will group together, even if they're not friendly to each other, and say, we need to take care of this situation, or or they're just gonna, they're gonna take us out. So it's a self-solving problem, right?
Yeah.
You end up being so dangerous that you become, like you said, you become the monster.
And Twilight 2000,
Yes.
2000 or whatever it is.
It was 2013 too, but
that one it's true. It's like any kind of post-apocalyptic society is going to be more like a warlord or a clan kind of
right
world afterwards, even if there is a semblance of a United States government or a Russian government or whatever. There's going to be places where there is no law.
Right.
So the laird or the what do you call him in American?
Strongman.
The warlord, the clan leader, the person that you've put in charge, and his men below him. There's always going to be somebody to protect your place, right? Your clan.
Right. People are going to stick together for one reason or another.
And
for
safety is
protection.
going to be safety, food, taking care of, making sure people don't die, that kind of thing.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. If the mercenaries come in, or even the soldiers that are just trying to get home, they're going to see a world that isn't the same, and you're going to have to make hard choices.
Yeah,
about
agree.
what you're going to do, and you're not going to want to be the people who are just randomly killing people for no reason.
Right. Nobody wants those people as neighbors.
No.
And so I think you're right. I mean, even in a lawless post-apocalyptic world, people are going to band together for safety. And if they see a group of people who seemingly don't care about life and easily will kill things just to take their stuff or whatever, and there is going to be some of that, right? There's going to be I need to live. You have food. You're not going to give it to me. Then that's going to be a problem. So stuff like that. But the idea that to kill everybody, to the last man, is kind of like the murder hobo way of looking at things, and nobody wants that. Everybody can see, well, killing that person who is a farmer, even if he didn't want to give you stuff, kind of is a problem, because like now we're down to this farmer who actually knew how to grow stuff and was important to everybody around him, even if he did charge you or was an ass.
And in D&D, you should never kill a farmer. I'm just saying, because I mean, unless they're like a vampire farmer or something. I mean,
it's a touchy subject. I think hopefully your characters, your players, aren't that kind of thing. But if it does happen, I think ultimately you bring down the big hammer, right? You say that's not right.
You just want to make sure that everybody knows there's consequences to their actions,
right? Whether
it's that you're gonna die. You like in Call of Cthulhu, you have I have like 12 hit points or something. I admit the monsters don't do, like you're losing sanity points faster than you're losing hit points, so it's
Yeah, that's how they win.
you have to stop looking at things and just
Yes.
keep your head down and go. But that's the same with D&D. If you're a low level character, you may not want to be the one to step straight into the battle if you have 12 hit points, because some of those monsters can take you out with 12 hit points.
Yeah, easy.
No matter what you're playing, you need to consider that there's consequences to your actions. Mike is always talking about that. There's consequences to what you're doing, whether it's rushing in to kill the monster,
Oh yeah.
or accidentally killing the town guard because you didn't want to give up your weapon. There will be consequences to your
Right.
actions. So you should, as a player, you should realize that and know that,
I think in that situation, the choices I had was, do I let Steve keep that character? Right. That was the biggest question for me. Do I let him keep? Do I make him roll up another character? Because that was the only option I had. And if I let him out, or let him keep his character, it had to hurt. And so I mean, I kind of realized, because I was a DM, I was obviously the one. No, I was always the GM, so I knew how much money I had given them and stuff. So I knew that when I charged them 3,000, they would all have to pull their money together, and none of them were happy about that. Right? None of them were happy, but they were more. But they were like, and some of them thought we should leave them behind. I mean, there was that talk, and so and I think that, I mean,
Well, and these were kids trying to
yes,
figure out the two of them, it was their dad.
yes,
So there's the
yeah. So
familial pool
yeah.
there.
But there was Blaine who, like, I don't know, that's a lot of money.
And there was Augustine going, I don't want to give up my money.
Yeah, so he didn't want to give up his money either. And he's like, it wasn't my fault. I give up my weapons, right? And so I think he was a monk, though. So
Yeah.
he didn't have any weapons. But
He was the weapon.
yeah, it was a lethal weapon. So yeah, I think, ultimately, anytime something like that happens, you can't let it slide, and you have to have consequences. I know we said that numerous times, but it's a difficult situation because, like in D&D, like I said, my biggest question was, does Steve get to keep his character? And now that I think about it, I probably shouldn't, because that would have been a bigger lesson to my son and his sons about consequences to the game. Well, they're just not going to let you out, no matter how much you pay.
That would have been a tough one for the kids, because
Oh, for Steve?
maybe for Steve too. Well, that was, and it's a fine line when you're playing games. You need to make sure you keep. I don't know. I know there's people that play evil characters, so I don't know what they do. But evil characters doesn't necessarily mean you're just evil. It means there's reasons for what you do, right? You're always out for yourself, or different kinds of things.
Unless
right?
you're playing a really wacky, what is it, chaotic evil or something like that, you know,
There can be lawful evil.
I've heard people say, well, evil characters don't think they're evil; they just have weird motivations for what they do. Or villains, right? Villains don't think they're villains; they really believe in their cause, and they think that they're doing the right thing.
There you go. So hopefully this gives you an idea of things to do if that happens in your game.
Yeah.
Just do your best. Try not to get your players mad at you. Try to make sure that everybody knows what's going on.
Yeah, I think the worst thing you could probably do is grab that player's character sheet, just rip it up, and say, "Yep, make a new character. this one's
You
mine."
just got yourself hung.
Yeah, or make him an NPC. Yeah, he's not my character. I've heard of stuff like that happening though. When the character either becomes, for whatever reason, they become an NPC. Either they turn evil. Some people, I've heard of that happening where they lose sanity, or they turn to the dark side or whatever, and that's not the kind of game that the GM wants to run, or the campaign. That's not the kind of campaign it is. So the GM will literally, or the player gives up the character. I've heard of that happening too, where the character goes, the player goes, well, yeah, this character, he's gone over the edge. So you have an NPC, new villain.
I'm making a new character.
you have a new villain.
I'm done with this one. So there you go. Have fun. Try to enjoy your games. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
You have a good day.